Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Abdullah. I'm here with my wonderful group members, Amira Abdulrahman and Mahi Chin, and we'll be presenting on AEON's and Parkson's ratio analysis. Please enjoy it.
Okay, here's the outlines of our presentation. Firstly is the objectives, followed by background of company, liquidity ratio analysis, solvency ratio analysis, profitability ratio analysis, and finally we will present on the conclusion.
Here is the objectives. The first one, the objective of this presentation is to determine the ability of two companies, AEON and Parkson, from the same industry to meet their short-term obligation and long-term obligation, and also their profitability. Secondly, is to evaluate the company's performance in 2015 and find out whether the companies are well positioned going forward. The third one, the result of this analysis will help investors make wise decisions on which company to invest in.
Okay, now on to the company backgrounds. We will start with AEON, then to Parkson. AEON Berhad was formerly known as Jaya Jesco Stores, Sendirian Berhad, and is a Japanese company and a leading retailer in Malaysia. It was set up in 1984 in Malaysia in response to the then Malaysian Prime Minister Datuk Seri Dr. Mahathir's request to help modernize the retail industry when he visited Japan. It currently has 32 stores in Malaysia with plans of 700 million ringgit expansion. It also has operations in ASEAN countries and in China. Parkson Holdings Berhad, or also known as PHB, was incorporated on 26 August 1982 as a private limited liability company under the name of Amalgamated Cement Mills Sdn Bhd. It was converted to a public company on 17 August 1992 and assumed its present name of Parkson on 19 September 2007. It currently has 43 stores in Malaysia, and the company also has operations in Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar, and China.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Amir Rahman and I will proceed with the solvency ratio. Solvency ratio analysis is to measure a company's ability to sustain operations indefinitely by comparing debt levels with equity, assets and earnings. In other words, solvency ratios identify going concern issues and a firm's ability to pay its bills in the long term. We have analyzed two ratios from solvency analysis. Firstly is the debt ratio and followed by the interest coverage ratio. Okay, firstly is a debt ratio analysis. The formula of debt ratio is total liabilities divided by total assets. Based on our findings, AEON has a 54.37% of debt ratio, while Parkson have 57.73% of debt ratio. A lower debt ratio usually implies a more stable business with the potential of longevity because a company with low ratio also has a lower overall debt. AEON's debt ratio is lower than Parkson and it shows that most of the AEON assets are fully owned by equity and not debt. Okay, secondly is interest coverage ratio analysis. To find the interest coverage ratio analysis, we have to divide the EBIT with annual interest expense. Based on our findings, AEON has 11.4264 times in more than Parkson interest coverage ratio, which is 0.6069 times. ICR or interest coverage ratio measures a company's ability to make interest payments on its debt in a timely manner. AEON has a ratio of 11.4264 times and it means that AEON has makes 11.4264 times more earnings than its current interest payments. This is a good sign because it shows the company risk is low and the operations are producing enough cash to pay their bills. However, Parkson shows a lower ratio that is below 1 indicates a company is not generating sufficient revenues to satisfy its interest expense. If company ratio is below 1, it will likely need to spend some of its cash revenues in order to meet the difference or borrow more. Otherwise, even if earnings are low for a single month, the company risks falling into bankruptcy.
Okay, the first measure of analysis that we are going to use in this presentation is the liquidity. And liquidity is just the computation that is used to measure a company's ability to pay its short-term debts. So the first item that we are going to look into under the liquidity is the current ratio. And upon analyzing these two companies, AEON and Parkson, we come to the conclusion that AEON has a current ratio of 0.45 and Parkson has a current ratio of 1.30. These results were reached by dividing the current assets by the current liabilities of both companies. Here we can see that the current ratio for Parkson is higher than the current ratio of AEON, which indicates that Parkson is in a better position to meet its short-term obligation. However, it is not uncommon to have lower current ratio in industries that have high turnover rate. So maybe some AEON's profit is not even recorded yet. It is possible that despite its low current ratio, it can still meet its obligation when due. Further analysis into the two companies for their solvency and profitability ratios is important to reach a final decision. So the second ratio under the liquidity is quick ratio, also known as acid test ratio, and it analyzes how well a company can meet its short-term financial obligation with its most liquid assets. This is very important, with its most liquid assets. For this reason, the ratio excludes inventories from current assets. So the higher the quick ratio, the better the company's ability to meet its obligation. So the analysis of these two companies, AEON and Parkson, shows us that AEON has 0.17 while Parkson has 1.18 upon the analysis of their quick ratio. How do we arrive at these figures? We arrived by subtracting inventories from current assets and dividing that by current liabilities, or simply current assets minus inventories all over current liabilities. The quick ratio of Parkson is again higher than that of AEON, but further analysis into other measures is needed to make a wise decision.
Okay, as you can see here from the Parkson income statement, in 2015 they're actually operating at loss. So it indicates that their interest coverage of ratio is low as well. So it means that they are not able to pay their debts in timely manner.
After analysis of liquidity and the solvency of the two companies, AEON and Parkson, now we are going to analyze the profitability of these two companies. The first one under the profitability analysis is profit margin analysis. Actually, the profit margin ratios directly measures what percentage of sales is made up of net income. This ratio also directly measures how well a company manage its expenses relating to its net sales. So all of the companies, they are strive to achieve higher ratios. And this ratio is best used to compare like-sized companies in some industry. Here is the formula: profit margin equals net income divided sales revenue. Through the conclusion, we can get that even in 2015, the profit margin is 3.4%. And Parkson, actually, the figure is negative, 0.32%. It means 3.4% of sales revenue of AEON is up and profit, but Parkson actually lost in the year 2015. The amount of loss lost in this year is 0.32 of its sales revenue. And it also shows us that maybe because the outcome, or maybe because the management of AEON in 2015 is more effective than what Parkson's management. And the other reason may be because Parkson met a great competition in 2015. Continuing, I'm going to introduce the second term under profitability: gross profit margin. Gross profit margin ratio is a profitability ratio that compares the gross margin of a business to the net sales. This ratio measures how profitable a company sales its inventory or merchandise. It only makes sense that higher ratio are more favorable. Here is the gross profit margin. The formula: gross profit margin equals sales revenue minus cost of goods divide sales revenue. From the conclusion, we get that the gross profit margin of AEON is 40.1%, and this ratio of Parkson is 69%. It means Parkson actually have more money to make expenses like wages and utilities and rate. And also the ratio is very industry specific. It's a narrow ratio for overall performance and can ignore many expenses. Still cannot control the other expenses. Here is a third term under the profitability: return on assets. Return on assets is a return generated by the assets for those who funded the assets. Here is a formula: return on assets equals income before tax plus interest expenses divide asset at the start of period plus assets of end of period divide 2. Through the calculation, we got that the return on assets of AEON company is 6.1%, and this figure of company Parkson is 2.1%. It means 6.1 cents was generated from every ringgit invested in assets and is available as a return for those who funded the assets. And for the Parkson, only 2.1% was returned from the assets. The difference between two companies may be because AEON's management has made better asset allocation decisions in terms of revenue and also has better control of costs in relation to expenses. Now the last one under profitability is return on equity. Return on equity is a profitability ratio from the investor's point of view, not the company. In other words, this ratio calculates how much money made based on the investor's investment in the company, not the company's investments in assets or something else. Higher ratios are always better than low ratios, but have to be compared to the other companies ratio in the same industry, since every industry has different levels of investors and income. From the calculation, we can get that the return on equity of AEON is 1.8% and the figure of Parkson is negative, is 0.003%. It means in 2015, the common stockholders, they can make profit in AEON company, but the stockholders in Parkson actually they made loss in the year 2015.
Okay, the conclusion is we will advise the investor to choose AEON than Parkson because AEON is a better choice. Firstly, is because of their low current ratio. Even though they have a current ratio or quick ratio is less than 1, they can still be able to meet their short-term obligation. This is because of their in the retail industry, means that they have a high turnover. And secondly is AEON have a high interest coverage ratio. It indicates that they have they be able to convert their earnings to pay their debts in timely manner. And secondly, and last but not least, they have high ROE and ROA because ROE and ROA indicates the profitability of AEON.